I am Gina, a 40-year-old mother of two, married to Howard, a kind-hearted man who has been my rock for most of 2 decades. My life is like a roller coaster, sometimes sharp climbs, sometimes steep drops. But I always say that the key to this ride is the people sitting with you in the cart. They are what make the journey bearable, despite all the surprises fate throws your way. Tom, my younger brother, became one of the most intense storms in this ride. He's 8 years younger than me, and honestly, his life was a whirlwind of poor decisions and misplaced priorities. He was one of those guys who believes life is supposed to be easy, that it will always fall at his feet. Our parents tried to guide him, his mom always said he'd grow out of it. But by the time he was 30, he was still the same boy, living off his family without taking responsibility for his own future. And then one Sunday, when we gathered at Mom's house, which had always been our sanctuary, a place where childhood memories lived in every corner, everything fell apart. Howard, the kids, and I were enjoying her roast and listening to her stories, the kind of stories we only knew through her eyes, when Tom barged in like a storm. We didn't expect anything like this. The door slammed against the wall, and he appeared in the doorway with a self-satisfied smile, as if he had just made a life-altering decision. And clinging to his arm was a young woman, barely out of her teens. Her pregnant belly was impossible to ignore, especially in the dress that was clearly more suited for a nightclub than a family dinner. Howard choked on his tea, and Emily, my 12-year-old daughter, curiously asked if this girl was going to be Aunt Lisa to our 8-year-old son Max. Max, as usual, was more interested in superficial things, and his question was about Lisa's dress. Why was it so shiny? All I could hear was the faint clink of a fork dropping from Mom's hands, and then Tom's words, spoken with such importance, as though it were an official announcement. "We're getting married," he said, his self-satisfied smile giving the impression he had just made a historic discovery. We all fell silent. Lisa, ignoring us, tossed her hair back and gave us a look that could curdle milk. Then she added, "Yes, we're getting married. And this little guy, the one I'm holding by the belly, is our son." The room went so quiet that I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Howard cleared his throat and said, "Congratulations, Tom. That's big news." Tom just smirked, as though another step in his chaotic life had been completed. "We'll stay here for a while, until we find a place," he added, as though he were doing us a favor. Mom tried to smile, but I saw the concern in her eyes that she couldn't hide. It felt like watching someone set up camp on the edge of a cliff. That night, after the kids had fallen asleep, Howard and I sat down and discussed Tom. "Gina, your brother lacks responsibility." "He's not just irresponsible, he's using your mom," Howard said. And I knew he was right. Tom was like a tornado, destroying everything in his path, and we all stood before him, not knowing what damage he would cause before he left. The next few days blurred into indistinct patches, almost unnoticeable in the flow of daily events, as Tom and Lisa continued to make themselves at home. Lisa, as if unaware of the boundaries of other space, immediately began turning the living room into her personal domain. She propped her feet up on the old coffee table that once belonged to Mom, a beautiful and restlessly aging piece, once the centerpiece of all our family gatherings. Now, its surface had become the captive of high heels and thoughtless gestures. As for Tom, instead of caring for the family, he spent entire days glued to his phone. He laughed at things that no one else found funny, and all that concerned him was a few words on the screen. We all lived in his world, a world where there was no room for gratitude or mutual understanding. Mom, as usual, ran around trying to continue cooking and cleaning up after them, but never received a word of thanks. I often watched as she, increasingly exhausted, seemed to deflate. It was like watching a balloon slowly lose its air. One day, I found her in the kitchen alone, looking older than she truly was, her shoulders slumped, and her eyes reflecting the years. It was hard to watch. "Mom, you can't let them walk all over you," I said, trying to rouse her from her apathy. She sighed, as someone who had long since run out of words to respond, and quietly, almost in a whisper, said, "Gina, he's my son, and this child. I can't turn my back on them." I wanted to shout, to exclaim that they were simply using her, that her kindness was something they took for granted. But instead, I bit my tongue. My family had always been complicated, and sometimes love meant not so much protection as the ability to turn a blind eye to the obvious, trying to preserve something important. And so began our new normal with Tom and Lisa, ungrateful guests and us, trying to keep the peace in a house that suddenly seemed too small. I knew this was only the calm before the storm, because with each passing day, my life with Tom and Lisa became more unstable. Every new day began with Lisa's loud complaints about back pain, or something else that was wrong in her life. She would wake up and, barely out of her pajamas, head straight for the kitchen, demanding breakfast, as if the place now belonged to her. "Gina, make me those pancakes, okay? The little one is craving them," she would say, and her tone was so confident it sounded more like an order than a request. The word "please" never passed her lips, and I just held myself back, trying to maintain my composure. Lisa allowed me to get Emily and Max ready for school first. Meanwhile, Tom lounged on the couch, his feet resting on Mom's coffee table, completely absorbed in his laptop or a game. When breakfast was ready, he shouted for it without even bothering to lift his head, as if the only thing that mattered was mealtime, not what was happening around him. Mom tried to play the peacemaker, repeating, "Gina, they're still young, remember how we were when we were their age." But I couldn't answer, because it wasn't the same as when we were young. We never acted like entitled children, with our own problems, aspirations, and worries, and she just brushed me off, eager to wait until they told her what they needed. When Lisa started preparing for the birth, things got even worse. She left a mess everywhere she went, piles of dishes, forgotten laundry, and there she was, on the phone, talking for hours, paying no attention to anything around her. One day, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I walked into the living room and found her, as usual, with her feet on the coffee table, loudly chatting with a friend, completely unconcerned with the chaos in the house. I could no longer stay silent, and despite myself, I said to Tom, "We need a new car, something safe for the baby. You understand, she can't just sit around, we need something that will protect them." But instead of supporting me, Tom looked at me disapprovingly, as if I were disturbing his peace. "This is not a hotel, Gina. You can't just expect everything to be cleaned up after you." Lisa shouted, and in that moment, I understood how she reacted to any call for order. Tom intervened, defending her as usual. "Gina, leave it alone. Can't you see she's carrying my child? Pregnancy doesn't give you the right to be a slob." Tom's mom came in, jingling her rings as if trying to break the silence that was becoming heavier and more awkward. "Please, let's not argue. It's bad for the baby," she said, her voice gentle but exhausted, like her face, which had sunken from tiredness with dark circles under her eyes. I looked at her with concern. This wasn't right. "Mom, you're wearing yourself out for them," I tried to say, but she didn't listen. "They're family, Gina, what can we do?" Her words hung in the air, and I felt everything inside me tighten. The days dragged on slowly, painfully. Tom and Lisa disappeared for hours, leaving only chaos in their wake that Mom had to deal with. They would return, loaded with shopping bags, laughing and giggling, sharing the joy of their weekend as if nothing had happened. But the worst was yet to come. One evening, when I was trying to find some peace, I overheard their conversation, which left me utterly speechless. "We need the best wedding, baby. This is our day," Tom said, holding Lisa with such an air as if he had just come up with the grandest idea. Lisa, as usual, giggled in response. "And your mom can help with the expenses, right?" Her words struck me like a whip. I couldn't believe my ears. Mom? Mom should pay for their wedding? I couldn't hold back, and, filled with anger, I asked them, "Are you seriously planning a wedding you can't afford and expecting Mom to pay for everything?" Tom shrugged, not even trying to hide his carelessness. "Why doesn't she have money?" he asked, and his nonchalance infuriated me. I was seething. "You can't keep using Mom as your personal ATM, Tom." But, as usual, my words fell on deaf ears. He and Lisa just laughed and continued to build their grand plans, paying no attention to me at all. I felt my anger boil over. In Mom's life, which was already in a bad state, everything was becoming more and more unbearable. Lisa gave birth to a boy, Alex, and I thought that maybe this would slow down their behavior, but in reality, it only gave them more excuses. One morning, I walked into the kitchen and saw Mom washing a mountain of dishes left from their last dinner. Lisa was lying on the couch, staring at Alex, while Tom was playing some game on his phone. I could feel my irritation building and walked over to Mom. "Mom, why are you washing all these dishes?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Mom just sighed, as though she had long since run out of words to respond. "Lisa needs to rest, and Tom is healthy." "Tom is busy," her words sounded hollow, like an excuse I couldn't accept anymore. I glanced at Lisa, who, despite her new role as a mother, was still lying there effortlessly. "You can't just leave everything to Mom," I said, but Lisa gave me a tired look. "I just had a baby, Gina." "I shouldn't be stressing," she replied without moving. Tom didn't even look up from his phone screen and muttered, "Yeah, Gina, move aside. You don't know how hard this is." I stood there, stunned. How could they talk like that? They sat around doing nothing all night, and now they were complaining about their hard lives. "You've been sitting on your ass all day." I couldn't hold back. Mom tried to calm things down, her voice soft and tired. "It's fine, Gina, I don't mind." But I didn't care anymore. "No, this is not okay. You're not their servant." But my words again fell on deaf ears. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. Tom and Lisa didn't care. They'd leave the house for hours, leaving Mom to watch Alex, and return with new bags full of clothes and gadgets, boasting about their good deals. One day, while sitting at the table, I happened to notice a receipt lying on the surface. It was from one of the well-known boutiques, and I immediately realized the amount was far higher than expected. It was for a designer dress for Lisa. The price was staggering, more than most people make in a week, or even longer. I couldn't believe my eyes. The sum was so large I could barely contain my anger. Where did they get that kind of money? I couldn't understand how they could continue living like this. I approached them, holding the receipt in my hand. "Tom, where did you get the money for this? And why should Mom pay for your lifestyle?" I asked, trying to hide the flames that were already burning inside me. Tom, as usual, shrugged carelessly. "She's our mom, Gina, she wants to help," he replied with such ease, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My patience snapped. I was furious. "Help? She's bleeding for them, and you're saying she's helping?" I couldn't hold back. But then Lisa, smirking, sneered and said, "If she wants to, why not? By the way, what's it to you?" Her words, like the edge of a knife, struck me right in the heart. I couldn't take it anymore. The next morning, I insisted on talking to Mom alone. Mom, you can't keep giving them money. They're using you. I started, trying to get through to her, to show her that what was happening wasn't right. But Mom just shook her head, her gaze full of regret. I can't abandon them, Gina, especially not Alex, she said, as if she didn't see the whole picture. I tried to explain that they weren't taking responsibility, that Tom wasn't looking for work, and Lisa was just spending money like water. But Mom just averted her gaze with difficulty, her voice barely audible. I know, Gina, but they're my children. I have to help them. With every minute, I felt more helpless. I watched as my family fell apart before my eyes, as Tom and Lisa, like leeches, sucked everything out of Mom and gave nothing in return. And Mom, bless her heart, was too kind to see it. I didn't know how much longer I could endure. I knew the breaking point was near, and I was afraid of what would happen when we finally reached it. When Mom suddenly fell ill, everything collapsed. It happened so quickly. One day she was her usual self, and the next, she was bedridden, looking fragile and weak, as though her strength had been drained. I sat beside her, holding her hand, trying to find the strength to support her. Mom, you'll get through this, I whispered, trying to sound more confident than I felt. She looked at me with tired eyes and gave me a faint smile. I'm just tired, Gina. I've had a good life, she said, and her words pierced me to the core. Tom and Lisa didn't appear, they were nowhere to be seen. Maybe Lisa was once again spending more of Mom's money, but Mom couldn't see that. I could no longer contain my anger. Where are they, Mom? Why aren't they here to help you? I asked, desperation and pain in my voice. Mom just sighed and looked into the distance. They have their own life, Gina. Don't be too hard on them. I couldn't agree with her words. I couldn't just sit back while everything was so unfair. Their life, Mom. They're living off of you, and now, when you need them the most, they're not here, I said, already losing hope for any understanding. Mom sighed again, and I felt my heart tear apart when I saw her so defeated, lonely, and exhausted. And then the inevitable happened. One night, while I was by her side, Mom quietly passed away. I sat by her bed, and her departure was so silent that I felt I didn't even realize when she had gone. Tom and Lisa weren't there. They were probably off doing whatever they usually did, ignoring the tragedy unfolding right in our home. The funeral was like a blurred stain in my memory. I remember Tom and Lisa arriving, as if they were preparing for a party, not mourning a loss. Lisa's dress was inappropriately short and bright, even for a funeral, and people whispered about it, though no one dared to say anything aloud. Howard squeezed my hand, trying to comfort me, but everything felt hollow. After the service, Tom pulled me aside, as usual, with some air of importance. Gina, we need to talk about Mom's will. I was still in shock from losing Mom, and everything that was happening felt unreal, like some hazy nightmare. But now, it couldn't wait, Tom was insistent, like never before. No, Gina, I can't wait, he said with such determination that it made me uneasy. I know she left the house to me, we need to figure everything out. I couldn't believe his audacity. Mom had just passed away, and he was already barging into my life, demanding something that wasn't his. Can you show some respect? I blurted out, trying to hold back my fury. But his mother, as always, was relentless. It's important, Gina. I'm her son, I deserve this, he repeated, as if his words should make everything right. The day after the funeral, I went to Mom's house to begin sorting through her things. My heart still hadn't recovered from the grief, and memories of our life together, of our home where Mom and I had shared everything, joys and hardships, kept swirling in my mind. But when I reached the door, it opened unexpectedly. Lisa stood in the doorway, wearing a self-satisfied smile. "What do you want, Gina?" she asked, smirking. I was taken aback by her attitude. "I came to get some of Mom's things," I replied, trying to stay calm. Lisa laughed, her laugh cold and sharp, like steel. "Oh, didn't you hear? This is our house now. Tom got everything." At that moment, Tom appeared behind her, grinning. "Yeah, Gina, Mom changed her will. Everything is mine now. The house, the money, it's all mine." I felt a wave of anger wash over me, and disbelief paralyzed me. "You're lying. Mom would never have done this," I shouted, trying to comprehend how such words could be said. But Tom just shrugged. "Believe whatever you want, Gina, but the will is clear. This is my house now." I stood on the threshold, feeling the house I grew up in slipping away from me. This wasn't just the loss of a mother, this was a blow that shattered my heart. I was losing not only my mom but also the home of my childhood, all because of my brother's greed and his wife's manipulation. As I walked away, I knew this wasn't the end. I had to fight, for Mom, for my family, and for what was right. But I didn't even know how hard this battle was going to be. I was a bundle of nerves when I walked into the notary's office. The whole situation felt like a bad dream. Losing Mom was hard enough, but fighting Tom over her will, that was something I had never thought about, never prepared for. The notary, Mr. Jacobs, was an old family friend. He looked up when I entered, his face darkening. "Gina, I'm sorry for your loss. Let's get straight to the matter." I nodded, trying to steady my voice. "Mr. Jacobs, Tom says Mom left everything to him." "That can't be true." Mr. Jacobs shuffled through some papers and finally said, "Well, let's see what the will says." At that moment, the door opened, and Tom and Lisa walked in, their smug confidence unmistakable. Lisa gave me a triumphant smirk, ready to enjoy watching me lose. I ignored her and focused on Mr. Jacobs, who cleared his throat and began reading the will. My heart was pounding in my chest. I braced myself for the worst, but then Mr. Jacobs said something that made my heart leap. A sum of $5,000. He began, and I felt a chill run through me. Tom's face stretched in disbelief, as if he had been expecting more. But Mr. Jacobs continued, "And to my daughter Gina, I leave the family home and the remainder of my estate." I couldn't believe it. Relief and disbelief hit me at the same time. Lisa was furious, her face contorted with rage and confusion. "This is impossible. She promised us the house," she shouted, clearly unable to comprehend how this could have happened. Mr. Jacobs gave them a stern look, his gaze a silent condemnation of their audacity. "It seems your mother made this last will a month ago, after expressing concern about undue pressure from certain family members," he said, not allowing them to disrupt the process. Tom was livid, his face turning red, and he began yelling, "This is nonsense. She wanted me to have the house." His words were filled with such furious dissatisfaction that I could barely believe what I was hearing. But inside, a sense of justice was growing. "Mom knew what you were doing, Tom. She saw your greed, she saw how you used her, and she made sure her last wish was honored." Tom turned to me, his eyes flashing with malice. "You did this. You turned her against me," he shouted, as though that was the entirety of his truth. Lisa spoke in a piercing voice, full of threat. "We'll contest this. We'll hire a lawyer." But Mr. Jacobs raised an eyebrow and responded, "You can do that, but be aware, If it's found that there was any coercion involved in the previous will, there may be legal consequences." He looked at them calmly, and I noticed their confidence begin to waver. I stood up, feeling strength building inside me. "Mom saw your greed, Tom, and she made sure her last wish was carried out." I could no longer hold back. This was the moment when I could finally say everything I had been keeping inside for so long. Tom stormed out, muttering curses under his breath, and Lisa, throwing a displeased glance at me, followed him. I remained behind, thanking Mr. Jacobs before leaving his office. As I stepped outside, I was overwhelmed with a mix of emotions: sadness over the loss of my mom, relief that her last wishes had been honored, and deep, lingering anger at Tom and Lisa's audacity. But the strongest feeling was that I had finally taken control of the situation, that I had managed to stop their manipulation, at least for now. I returned home and started going through some of Mom's papers. My mind was still occupied with recent events when the door burst open, and Tom stormed into the room. His face was flushed with anger and disbelief. "100,000 for you and a measly 5,000 for me. How's the lovely Gina doing?" His words hit like a blow. He couldn't believe what had happened, and his aggression knew no bounds. Nervously clutching the papers in my hands, I paused and waited for a moment. "Tom," I said, calmly despite the storm inside me, "this is what Mom decided. You know, she always had her reasons." I saw his face twist with rage. What reasons could she have to set me up like this? His voice was low and guttural, and he slammed his hand on the table, making me jump in surprise. I clenched my teeth, taking a deep breath, trying to stay composed. "Maybe because you and Lisa have been draining her dry for years," I said, not hiding my anger. Tom's face contorted with fury, his eyes filled with hatred. "This is bullshit," he shouted. "We deserve that money." That's when I found them, hidden in a drawer, a letter from Mom. I immediately recognized her handwriting, unmistakable, painfully familiar. I pulled out the letter and began reading. Tom's eyes, standing across from me, were fixed on me with a strange mix of curiosity and fear. He must have already suspected that this was something important. "Is this from Mom?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Yes," I replied evenly, trying to hide the storm that was beginning to rage inside me. "She explains everything here." I looked at him, almost through him, reading every stroke, every word she had written to explain what had happened. The letter was written in clear handwriting, black on white. Mom had originally set aside $100,000 for both Tom and me, but as Tom and Lisa's demands for money grew, she started subtracting from his share. I looked at Tom. His face froze in shock as he realized that Mom had already made her decision a long time ago. "By the time she wrote her last will, you had already taken $95,000, Tom, leaving only $5,000. Tom recoiled as though he had been physically struck. His eyes, filled with rage, couldn't believe what I was showing him. "No, this can't be true," he shouted, grabbing his head. In that moment, I felt a wave of anger rising inside me. It was all right in front of me, black and white. Mom saw how you and Lisa drained her dry. It's all here, Tom. I couldn't hold back. You and Lisa took this, drained it from your inheritance. He looked lost, his eyes darting around the room, unable to find an answer. I couldn't help but notice that, in reality, he didn't want to know the truth. He just didn't want to face it. You never knew and you never wanted to know, I whispered, holding back my irritation. I snapped. My patience had run out, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. Tom, you chose this path, I said, feeling the weight of it all those years when his greed had torn us apart. Tom collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. What did I do, Gina? His voice sounded distant, as if he didn't know where to start. I couldn't respond right away. All I felt was a mixture of pity and disappointment. The letter wasn't just evidence, it was the final message from Mom, showing that she had seen what was going on. I struggled to put the letter down and said, "You can only blame yourself, Tom." He left the house that day, a broken and disappointed man. I stood in the doorway, watching him walk away, feeling a deep sense of justice, but also a bitter sadness. Our family had been torn apart, not just by grief, but by greed and ignorance, short-sightedness, and foolish loyalty to false beliefs. Once, this house had been a battlefield for family disputes, but now there was an unsettling silence. Tom and Lisa had left, cutting off all contact with me. And despite all the heavy feelings I was carrying, I couldn't help but wonder how this silence brought me both relief and a curse, for it forced me to confront the aftermath of their chaos. One day, sitting in the living room, looking at the walls that had witnessed so much, I heard the phone ring. It was my friend Jenna. "Gina, have you heard about Tom?" Her voice was cautious, as it always was when she knew she was about to bring up something difficult. I braced myself for the worst. "No, what now?" I asked, already sensing something terrible had happened. They spotted him in town, looking for work, and Lisa was seen with different men, strutting around like she was single. My legs gave out, and I sank into a chair, feeling my heart tighten. What had happened to them? How could they forget everything so easily? And Alex? I asked, feeling anxious for the child. "He hasn't been seen," Jenna said, and her words hit me like a blow. "Gina, it's like they've forgotten they have a child." I slammed my fist on the table, rage bubbling up inside me. "They're irresponsible, selfish, they don't deserve a child," I shouted. I felt my resolve growing stronger. I'm going to fight for Alex. He shouldn't have to suffer because of them. Jenna tried to calm me down. "Gina, maybe you can do something." Her words sparked a thought that flared up like a fire. Yes, she was right. I'm going to fight. I won't let them ruin this child's life. I have to save him. The next day, I met with an attorney, a woman with a serious expression, Miss Rivera. I told her everything, my voice trembling with determination. "So, you want to gain custody of your nephew?" she asked, looking at me carefully. I nodded firmly, feeling a sense of strength building inside me. Yes. He's in a toxic environment. I want to give him a better life. Miss Rivera leaned forward. "This won't be easy, Gina, but if you're ready to fight, I'm with you." I felt a rush of resolve. I was ready. No matter what it takes. Howard embraced me, his strong arms offering some comfort as my strength began to fade. "You're doing the right thing, Gina." "It's hard, but it's the right thing." I leaned into his embrace, exhausted but with a spark of hope finally starting to burn in my heart. I want Alex to be safe, to have a caring family. My words came out quietly, but with unyielding resolve. The day the judge granted me temporary custody of Alex was both bitter and sweet. Alex was such a sweet boy, confused and scared, but he slowly began to open up to us, trusting us despite everything he had been through. Emily and Max adored him, and he brought a new kind of joy and light into our home. There was something so touching in his eyes that made me believe in miracles. When Tom learned of the court's decision, his reaction was a mix of anger and defeat. "You took everything from me, Gina." His voice was filled with rage, and despite all my resolve, it was hard for me to watch his pain, even though I knew it was caused by his own actions. I looked at him calmly, my face unwavering. "I'm protecting Alex, something you should have done when he was still in your life," I said, understanding that our relationship could never be repaired. But this wasn't about us. It was about the little boy who needed a stable and loving family. With Alex, we began a new chapter. Of course, there were difficulties, moments of despair, but in their shadow, there was laughter, light, and love. He was becoming part of our family, and I was determined to make this last forever. Looking back on everything that had happened, I knew I had made the right decision. It was time for new beginnings for all of us, a chance to grow, heal, and build a future filled with love and stability. This was the legacy I wanted to leave, in sharp contrast to the selfishness and greed that had once threatened to tear us apart. The house, once full of arguments and family discord, was now filled with laughter and the patter of little feet. Alex had become a part of our lives, his presence bringing joy and wonder. One evening, when we were putting him to bed, he looked up at me with his big, innocent eyes. "Aunt Gina, will I stay here forever?" he asked, and I felt my heart fill with tenderness. I gently ran my hand through his hair, giving it a little shake. "Yes, Alex, you're part of our family now," I replied, and his face spread into a smile. His little hand tightly gripped mine. "I like it here, Emily and Max are fun." I kissed him on the forehead, holding him close, and whispered, "We're so happy you're here, sweetie." When I left his room, Howard was waiting for me in the hallway, his face full of pride. "He really settled in, didn't he?" he said, and I nodded, feeling my heart swell with a deep sense of duty fulfilled. "He's just like us. We're going to give him the life he deserves." The next day, I received a call from Miss Rivera. "Gina, the court has officially granted you full custody of Alex." I almost dropped the phone from the joy. Tears of happiness welled up in my eyes. "Thank you, Miss Rivera, thank you for everything," I could barely say, staring at the phone screen. When I hung up, I hurried to share the news with the family. Emily and Max joyfully greeted Alex, hugging him in a group. Even Howard had tears in his eyes. "We're family," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "A real, complete family." The journey had been long and full of challenges, but we had grown stronger. I thought of Tom and Lisa, wherever they were. I hoped they would find their way, but now my focus was on the children, on our family. In the months that followed, Alex flourished. He was no longer the shy boy we first met. He grew more confident, more and more believing in his happy and loved life. One day, when we were all in the garden, Alex ran up to me with a dandelion in his hand. "Look, Aunt Gina, I made a wish," he said, smiling. I crouched down to his level and asked, "What did you wish for?" His sparkling eyes couldn't hide the sincerity. "I wanted us all to be together forever." I hugged him tightly, feeling my heart overflow with love. "That's the best wish, Alex, and it's come true." As I looked at my family, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had weathered the storm, we had become stronger. Our future was filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. This was our story, a testament to the power of family and the strength of love. It was a future of hope, and we were ready to embrace it with open arms.